Hang on, let it get started. Whenever you're ready.
Welcome to the today's Q&A session, Organizational Development Shaping the Future of Business in 2021. Like you all know, OD is not in a crisis, but quite contextual at this point, and the profile of the OD function seems to be rising again, and will take, I believe, a very strategic seat by the end of 2020 or early 2021, and especially with the top executives recognizing the value of OD that it can create for building organizational capabilities. Today, I have with me Dr. Cabot Jaffee, President of AlignMark US, one of the well-known HR consulting and leadership development firms, and also a board member and advisor at Learngage. Together, we've been working with a lot of clients in India and outside across startups and MNCs to provide guidance to executives and HR leaders to improve efficiency through various assessment tools and retain and grow those talented individuals through various development interventions. Dr. Cabot is an expert in the field of OD. Over the last 30 years, has worked with a variety of companies, Fortune 500 of them, and used executive coaching and assessments. Welcome, Dr. Cabot. Thank you so much for being a part of the session today morning.
Thanks, Pavan. I really appreciate the time here, and this is a topic that I really like talking about. So I look forward to kind of having a little Q&A session with you.
Sure. So, Dr. Cabot, let me start with asking a question that is something very fundamental. And I realize OD has always focused on the internal employees at the company, and that it seems to have lesser importance to shareholders and especially business executive minds. At a high level, why do you think OD needs to play a far more integral role in the decision-making process, looking beyond just the employees itself?
Yeah, that's a great question, and probably a good start. Kind of let me start at a high level, give you a little bit of my perspective on what is going on out there. And I think, OD's role is going to have to change. This pandemic and a crisis may lead to some quicker changes than would have happened otherwise, but I think organizations were headed in this direction anyway. And so first, let me say that I'm really a true believer in the idea that the greatest asset that any organization has is their people or their employees. Technology becomes a commodity, processes become engineering tasks, and the companies that outperform their competitors are those that end up, that end up with better people. And so with that as the premise, I think an organization needs to be most concerned with the impact of all of their decisions on their people. And their people are both their employees, their customers, their prospective customers, their prospective employees, and humankind in general, I think is becoming a big push. Companies focus, and traditionally, especially at the board level, focus a lot on things like new technologies, how to make things more efficient, how to sell more, how to be more profitable. And oftentimes they do this, in my mind, without kind of looking at the long-range consequences of their decisions. So, for example, when you look at technology, as simple as, technology that farmers might use in order to produce more food, how do we re-engineer this process? Oftentimes, by kind of producing more food, you can lead to an increased carbon footprint, which leads to more technology needed in the form of robotics to reduce the carbon footprint and save some natural resources. Because we're efficient, though, farmers become efficient, it actually ends up eliminating some jobs and kind of thereby creating even a greater income disparity among people. And the high tech kind of opens up the possibility of cyber attacks and privacy issues. And so the simple task of helping a farmer produce more food using technology ultimately has some global impact, not just to their employees, but their loss of employees and humans. And that all has to change. Somebody in an organization needs to take that into account as they're making decisions and the impact of those decisions so they can deal with it. Keep in mind it's as simple as the internet, when it was created without any security in mind. It was an open system. It was an open system for everyone to share ideas. Over the last 10 years, security around the internet has been in the forefront. You know, the breaches, the data, the privacy acts, the hacking. And so this leads to questions regarding the ethics surrounding kind of the continued development of technology, wherever it is, who's responsible for those decisions. And that's, to me, where OD is going to play a major role. I mean, one other simple example, you know, a lot of artificial intelligence is being incorporated into cars as an example these days. You know, the self-driving cars. Well, should the AI be programmed to minimize loss of life, even if that means sacrificing its own driver to save multiple lives in another vehicle? So, or is it, you know, just around the preservation of public versus private property when avoiding an accident? Who's driving those decisions and answers to those kinds of questions within organizations? So the AI within a Tata Motors or a Ford or a Tesla, you know, is going to have some decisions that need to be made around that kind of issue that deals with humans and people. And that is going to be, in my mind, somebody within the OD function. That's where, you know, given the magnitude of those kinds of decisions, OD, in my mind, has to be at the board level within companies, contributing to every business decision, because people as the most important asset, you know, can't be left behind anymore.
I think, yeah, I think as we move up, what you're saying, and I hear is it's going to play a very strategic role, and eventually you will have most of the OD professionals, as we call them, working directly with business leaders and CEOs to, you know, measure business impact or engage with them. So my next question is: people are also increasingly recognizing the importance of leadership in OD, as you say, and the role of leaders throughout the organization is becoming critical to the success of those OD interventions. How do you think this is changing over the last few years? And, you know, are we seeing any challenges? Are you seeing opportunities in the longer term?
Yeah, again, very good question. Leaders over the last number of years, I think it's just moved slowly, but have needed to change. I think this pandemic is really accelerating that. They're faced with some huge challenges today, not just because of the pandemic, but just in the general marketplace. I mean, a somewhat new concept, although not too new, is, you know, we're living in what's called a VUCA world. The military came up with, you know, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And the leader's role, in my mind, is to lift the fog that's created by a lot of that uncertainty. So uncertainty always leads to cloudiness. Uncertainty leads to, you know, the unknown, obviously. And it's the leader's role to really help an organization and the people within that organization kind of lift that fog and make things clear again, make things less ambiguous, less volatile. And in order to do that, the traditional leadership skills, in my mind, that have been there forever, you know, critical thinking, good problem solving, good decision making, those aren't going away, but they're not what's most important today. And I think what's changing today is that these leaders need kind of a new set of skills at all levels of the organization, and these need to be developed in their people. It's no longer, you know, they have to be able to create a good vision, and more importantly, they need to be able to communicate that vision to others. And others, again, are their employees, their customers, their shareholders, their prospective employees. And those that can communicate that vision better will be a lot more successful as leaders. But that's a skill that's missing in tomorrow's leaders, in my mind. We know there's this millennial generation, this younger web generation. They're on their phone all their time. You see pictures of them at dinner. They're not talking to each other. They're talking to somebody else on the phone. Their self-awareness of what's going on around them isn't there. And so because they communicate differently, because they learn differently, because they have different tools, their skills need to be developed that they're lacking that they weren't getting otherwise. And I think that's a huge challenge for OD, but is critical as OD and leadership development moves into the latter half of this year and into 2021. We need leaders immediately that can help clear that fog, so to speak, in this ambiguous time, because every company is faced with new challenges as of 4 weeks ago almost, with the start of these shutdowns. That, yes, that's a kickstart, but that's just accelerating what has been needed in my mind for a number of years.
I think, like you said, leadership development will become one of the major investment areas. And I think if we don't develop those leaders in at least years to come, then we will see a lot of different people productivity as well. It's going to impact a lot of other areas in the organization. So, well, I understand that OD must talk business and simultaneously have a clear business case for its own activities. How can OD define, more importantly, strategy interfacing with, let's say, leadership development, learning interventions, or be it talent management functions? I mean, are we going to see a new role as ODBP, organizational development business partner, emerge in the next years to come? Like we've had HRBP as a role developed in the last a decade or so, which was completely aligned to our business or the business leader itself.
Yep. I think it's critical. Obviously, the OD function must talk business, and it's, this is not something that's going to flip on a dime and change overnight. I also think, though, it's even more important that the business now has to talk OD. So, there's got to be a push side from the OD, but there's also got to be a push elsewhere in the organization that links in, and they must now take into account the people side of the business and the OD topics. So, leadership development, succession planning, selection, hiring, all of those aspects need to be driven by business needs that go just beyond, what technology do we need? What process do we need? We've been talking about the importance of people and the development of people, and the companies that react quickly to that need are really going to do much better than those, that kind of remain with the status quo and where they've been now. And I think OD is going to be the driving kind of HR strategy that's going to transform and drive other departments' goals and objectives. And so I think the blending of business goals and OD goals really is going to open up a role for OD professionals to have a huge impact on the overall organizational strategy, and the idea that, goals will be set at the organization level and they'll cascade down to every department, but every department's going to have a people goal associated with it as they make their decisions.
Right. So, so I'm adding to that question, and then probably want to follow up with some of the skills that we see when you talk about OD. Given that you're saying that OD has to be aligned with business, which means that we need some of those skills that the OD professionals have to demonstrate. So, do you see a new set of skills that the OD professionals have to pick up and learn? For example, if I might say, OD will then need a lot of consultative skills versus human resources today is a lot of transactional skills. So, what is your view on those things?
Yeah, that's a great point. They don't need the technical skills of personnel and HR processes. They need strategy skills. They need communication skills. They need the skills that'll help transform a business, because if they don't do it on the people side, nobody else will. And so they need to become part of the think tank within the organization. And that's just not from an HR perspective, but it's from a business perspective first, and it cascades down to HR. But absolutely, I think your ODs, individuals that are driving strategy need a whole extra complex set of skills that'll be like other, board positions. A CEO, they need to be part CFO, part CEO, part strategist, part chief of staff. and a little piece of old traditional HR.
Right. I think, yeah, what you're saying is right. I think that's a fair good combination of both of these things. So let me move on to asking you something on the assessment side. And if you look at a decade ago, had we been asked to design a 360-degree feedback system to segment talent and make decisions about who would be there or who would be promoted, I'm sure all of us would have said no. But I see the times are changing, and the process of 360-degree feedback is no longer a fad. Especially if you look at organizations now, are using 360 for critical decision making in a variety of ways, whether it is for performance management or talent management or identifying high points. What role do you think assessments today can play and complement this whole OD function?
I think assessments are critical, and without them, companies will end up floundering and be lost. If you think about in the medical profession, in the medical field, if you get a prescription from a doctor before they diagnose what you even have, it's really considered malpractice. So you can't have prescriptions of what an individual should be doing about, a decision around their qualities, around what's good about them or bad about them, without some form of assessment. And so the better the assessment, the better decision making that's going to happen. And as you implement an OD program or a leadership development program, how do you know if it was even successful if we don't know where we were when we started and where we are at the end? And so if you say, okay, this person needs to develop some skills, or this is the person from a succession planning standpoint that should take the next role, how do you know if you don't have a quantitative, reliable, measurable, instrument in place to say, okay, here's how we can differentiate amongst people. The 360 plays a great role in that. It gives us multiple perspectives. It gives us accurate data. And that data then can be used in a lot of different ways. The goal of the 360 and other assessments is to get as accurate a picture of somebody as possible. And with that picture, you can make a lot of decisions on an individual basis, on a group basis. And I think assessments like 360s are going to be critical. And they've just proven themselves over and over.
Right.
The work we've done with companies like Kluber and Samsung and Bayer and Kaizen Pharmaceuticals, and all of these companies use these tools in a number of different ways. And the good news is it's a single assessment. The assessment's the easy part, but then they're getting good decisions made out of who is in a succession plan. How do I develop this person to be the next CEO? How do I develop this person to be the next chief sales officer? And where are the gaps between what we need as an organization and where this individual is? And let's close the gap so that they'll be as successful as possible. And that is, in my mind, critical for organizations to undertake as a way of making decisions. And because if they don't have that assessment, what are they using? Perceptions, how likable is this person? We think they'll be good just because we've seen them a little bit, but it's not documented. It's not quantified. It's not even necessarily a reliable measure. The 360 and other assessments give you that as a tool.
Interesting. So let me just step out of that zone and talk something about employee outcomes itself and things like well-being, which is also becoming a major concern for organizations today, especially when it comes to there is competition. People are hiring to retain and select talent. So do you think OD leaders can help in any way to diagnose those outcomes, put in some basic tools and techniques in place?
Yes, I totally agree that focusing only on work-related outcomes is no longer enough. That's definitely gone. As I mentioned, we have kind of this new generation of employee, and whether it's really worldwide, again, it's a web generation, so some of them aren't even so young anymore, but the number of individuals concerned with what I call corporate social responsibility, is growing, and they want more out of an organization than just work-related outcomes. They need companies to really answer for them, what good are you doing in the world? That's the company I want to associate with. That's the company I want to join. You know, one of the first questions from a talent acquisition standpoint that all employees now getting hired by companies are going to ask is, how did you treat your employees during this shutdown? You know, did you just furlough them and get rid of them? Did you keep paying them? And those companies that are concerned with their employees beyond just work-related outcomes are going to be the ones that win that war for talent of future employees, and are going to be the ones that are kind of presenting an employee value proposition to their employees that say, look, we're doing good in the world. We are thinking about people as we make our decisions, both internally and externally. And sometimes we're willing to take a hit if it's the right thing to do. OD leaders are going to be the drivers of corporate social responsibility, of looking at beyond those work-related outcomes more than any other department at the board level. You know, you may have an individual, but in my mind, that is the OD groups, whoever that representative is, that is one of their primary responsibilities, is to really think beyond, as you said, work-related outcomes, which is not going to be enough anymore.
Great, Kevin. So I think let me take the last question. Maybe either it's more or less like contextual at this point, because based on what you've been saying, and I realize that, and I hope everyone else does that too, that OD has a major role to play in creating, in quotes, a very successful organization in all parameters that they would want to measure. But how do we make that happen? How do we start changing our roles as OD professionals? Is there a way to transition ourselves, be it from a business to an OD, or is it from human resources to OD?
Yeah, that is the $64,000 question on, you know, how do we get from where we are now to where we all know organizations need to be. And it's obviously not going to be, there's no magic wand that says, you know, poof, we're there. I think we're going to have to start with small wins, small projects, small ways of moving the needle to show success, and then use that success to breed more success. It's obviously not going to happen overnight. Business cases are still going to have to be made. So this is where OD really, they have to have their people hat on, but they're still going to have to make a business case and show why it's the right thing to do. And sometimes that vision, we may need to look 10 years out before we understand the ramifications of certain business decisions that are going to be made on the people side of the world and humankind. You know, corporate social responsibility is based on a concern for people and humanity. And this needs to be driven by OD. If it truly believes that it can have an impact, then that impact needs to be incorporated into all decision making. So, you know, it is going to be baby steps. It's how do you get OD in a position where they'll be listened to? Well, that's going to take a great sales person on an OD side to say, look, you need to listen to me, and here's why. You can't take the person, all of that goes back to, okay, you need development of OD people. Well, who are their coaches? Who's coaching the OD person on what needs to be done within their organization differently? How do we keep them? How do we get them to change? Because the change is going to start with them, and that's where they would be, you know, well served by having coaches and counselors that have lived through crises, that have lived through business change, that understand the use of assessments and how that can impact their role. So it's almost, you know, not just starting with the leaders, it's starting with that OD person and doing an analysis of where are they and how do they need to change in order to move the business needle. That's almost the first, you know, small step. Do we even have the right OD people in the organization to begin with? But they need help, you know, because they've lived within the company, whether it's, you know, 2 years or 20 years, they have a mindset that needs to be moved. And this is a behavior that doesn't, we can't just tell them, here are the now 6 new steps to OD leadership. Oh, I got it, and I'm going to go back and do that. They need practice. They need sounding boards. They need feedback. And some of that will come from inside the organization. A lot of that would be really helpful to come from an outside coach that understands that change process and the behavioral, change that needs to happen in an individual and has the tools and experience to help them through that. So it is one of the toughest questions. There's not one cookbook answer. This process may work in company A. It's going to have to be changed and tweaked to work in company B because you have a totally different set of business decisions that are made. You have a different set of people. You have a different philosophy at the executive level of what corporate social responsibility might look like. And so it is not just one shoe fits all either. So everyone's going to be a little bit different, but there are clearly going to be some common threads.
Sure. So I think I'm done with the questions that we were wanted to put together and talk. There's one question that just came in now, and this is from an head of HR of an e-commerce firm, and he's asking, so can OD set a great example for an onboarding program in a company where hundreds of people, especially in that particular domain, are getting hired? So is there a way we can connect new employees early to the bigger picture by introducing company values, goals, actively reinforcing their purpose through hands-on activities? How can OD play a big role there? Any views on that, Dr. Cabot?
Yeah, so I think that's key. Obviously, the earlier the better. And in fact, we've been even looking at ways, how do you start establishing that onboarding mentality and show the employee value proposition even during the hiring phase? But so you're telling people kind of why you should be the place for them to work from a corporate social responsibility, from an onboarding, from an employee value proposition during the recruiting process. It needs to start day one when they're hired in the onboarding process, where that almost becomes more important and the initial foundation before they get into the onboarding of their specific job tasks. The job tasks are easy to teach. People can pick up the technical knowledge of a job, or they already have the technical knowledge. That is, here are the 6 steps to, working in the call center. Here are the 6 good steps to our payroll processes. What they don't have, and what's harder for them, because for some it may be a little bit of a disconnect, is, what are the soft skills? What is our philosophy on treating people, on corporate social responsibility, on OD's role and the employee's role in having an impact in the organization? If that can start day one, that'll go a long ways. In my mind, you absolutely cannot wait for that to be picked up just kind of, hey, on the job, you'll see it when you get out there. That's a big change I think companies can make, is to move that earlier in the onboarding process. I think you went on mute there real quick, Bob.
One Cabot that just came in, and this is, I just got a message. They're also talking about there is a whole lot of resistance to change when you hire an OD consultant from outside and you make him a part of the whole process to either do culture transformation or succession planning or leadership development. How can consultants and companies work together hand in hand to make those interventions successful?
So in my mind, the other good value that an OD consultant, an OD coach, an outside organization brings is, they have experiences with other companies. And I said, well, not every company is the same and every company is a little bit different. There's a lot of common threads. And so every company shouldn't have to reinvent their own wheel. That's where the OD consultant, OD coaches, those with outside experiences can not just bring in their own personal experiences, they work for other companies, but you understand, okay, what Kluber did. Now you understand what Samsung did. As you get to Bayer, as you get to, Infosys, the technology in the company doesn't have to be the same, but the people, there's a lot of common threads there, and you know what worked, what didn't work. You can really help them lay out what's best for them based on a lot of experience versus based on theory and thought. Well, I don't know, but let's try it. Well, we do know because when we tried it like this over here, here's what happened. We know that may not be exactly what happens, but it's never night and day. It's, oh, just a little bit different. So, that's, I think the quicker OD will move is driven by how much outside help they have. So they don't have to invent the wheel themselves, and they really shouldn't have to. A lot of companies have been through this, and there's a lot of people out there, with great experience on helping companies make that transformation.
Right. Okay. So I think again, someone has raised a question here. Swati wants to ask a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
First of all, sir, thank you so much for your time. I think this discussion has been really interesting. And one pointer that we were talking about some time back was about the 360 assessment and general assessments that we need to have to kind of frame our plans forward for any of the employees or for leadership training as well. So wanted to understand your views on psychometric tests and the usage and the importance of psychometric assessments and tests for analyzing any personality of people.
Yep. So every psychometric test, I think, can have a role. I think we need to make sure first and foremost that it's a sound psychometric test. So unfortunately, these days, there's a lot of technology companies having somebody internally just put a test online, calling it a psychometric test, but it hasn't necessarily been validated and proven and researched like it should have been. So one assumption here is that it's a psychometric test that has a history, has a research base, and has some validation data behind it to be able to prove that what we're measuring, and in fact is, what we say we're measuring is what we're measuring. If that's the case, then I think psychometric tests, no one test is the answer to all the questions, but each one gives you another piece of the pie when determining the picture of a person. And with each piece of that pie, you can make better decisions. If we only have one piece of pie, we're missing a lot where decisions won't be as accurate. If we have a personality piece of the pie and we understand their delegation skills piece of the pie and we understand their strategic thinking piece of the pie, wow, now we have almost half a pie. We're going to make much better decisions. And so they absolutely play a role. They just shouldn't be misused. And because it says, oh, this person is, as an example, is an introvert based on this psychometric test, therefore they can't be a sales leader. Well, no, that's absolutely not true. They may prefer to stay at home and read books, but they might be able to be very effective when put in a party, and they can still be the life of the party. They may not like it as much. So that's something that's good to know during the developmental planning for that person. We shouldn't make overall decisions based on that alone. We need to put that with, well, how good are their sales skills? How good are their communication skills? And so we can now say, hey, they're still good. They may not like it as much. That would lead to a very different development plan than if they're an extrovert, they like it, but they don't have the skills. So there's a lot of extroverts out there that aren't great sales leaders. And so therefore we can't just rely on only that.
Right, sir. Thank you so much. This was helpful.
Good.
Right. I think it's a great session, Dr. Cabot. Some interesting insights from what we spoke earlier as well, and I think we've had some great questions in the session as well. So thanks again for your time. So we'll speak soon, and you have a great weekend.
Pleasure. Thank you for everyone for joining us. Really enjoyed it. Look forward to others.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining the session.